Thanks. All right.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to the Leading the Way podcast. We're your hosts, Miles A. Zimmerman and Jay Alvarado.
And on this show, we take a look at life through the lens of leadership. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again. Please make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And visit our website at leadingtheway.show and drop us a line.
Absolutely.
We have gotten a few questions.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think we're going to wait a little bit until we start answering them on the air. We want to collect a few more. But to everybody that sent them in, thank you so much, and we'd love to hear more.
Absolutely. So today we're talking about communication, right? A big, huge topic.
Speaking of, yeah.
Right? Speaking of, I do want to shout out one of my best friends, Chris. He actually made the hoodie that I'm wearing. It says Hunt for Happiness. Kind of an inspiration from our podcast. I just want to wish him best of luck with what he's doing. Keep doing it. Keep hunting for happiness.
Chris, I'm a 2X, just to let you know. Put that out there.
Yeah. Communication. This is a big topic. This is, if you Google, look it up on YouTube, you're going to get so many, because it's, for me, it's kind of like the transportation to every destination. Like whatever you're thinking about doing, there's a component of communication that's involved in making it happen. Right. And I guess the statement is the biggest opportunity or the biggest miss in communication is the illusion that it's happening.
Interesting.
It's because I think there's a difference between speaking and communicating.
Right, absolutely.
I think a lot of times we're speaking to someone, which is kind of a one-sided street, right? It's a one-way. You're just speaking to them, and then we walk away assuming that they understand, that they comprehend what's been said, and they can actually apply it. But as you and I both know, not always the case.
Right, yeah.
For me, in my work and what I do, there's a lot of communication. As a general manager, constantly having to communicate to my staff what's going on, what's new, what's changed. And in our line of work in this industry, oftentimes we're posting things on the wall, right? And we're expected, the staff is expected to read it. And the assumption is that they read it and they understand it. And then so in the follow-up, it's like, hey, did you communicate this to, whoever? Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I told him. Yeah, I posted it. That's good. But do they understand? Did you take the necessary steps to make sure they understand what you're saying? Did they have any questions? Like, speaking to someone it's a very simple concept. I say words to you, and that's it. Yeah. I spoke to you. Communication, there's so much more involved. Like, speaking is just one component of communication.
Yeah, there's speaking at someone and speaking with someone.
Exactly,
yeah.
Right? And even speaking with someone doesn't necessarily mean communication is actually happening. We can sit here, hey, what's up? Oh, it's pretty good. How's your mama? She's good. What you doing today? I'm going to the store. Boom. We spoke with one another. Right? And that's on a kind of a base level of what communication is. But when you're talking about, say, teaching someone something they really new information they need to understand, there's so much more involved. There's so much more follow-up that is involved when it comes to communicating. But a lot of our everyday, we're just assuming that they understand. Right. You were married at one point. I'm married now. There's a lot of communication that happens, and we assume they got the message. They understand.
Right. Because we understand it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the person we're speaking to understands it.
We do it in text messages all the time.
Yeah.
We text someone something, and it's like, all right, we're good. I did my part.
Yeah.
They're good. Regardless if it says read, regardless if they text back, I did my part in sending the message.
Right.
Message sent. Okay. Message understood? Not exactly. And so I think that's one of the biggest opportunity, because communication happens in a much, I don't know if it's larger space or more intimate space that it's involved to ensure that both understand. Like, I understand what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying, and I understand that you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
There's all of that involved, and it happens far. It happens much further than just you just walking away.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more of that conversation that has to take place before you just walk away.
Right.
And so at work, that's oftentimes where we have to actually sit down, because this is not something I could just, like, some things are direct. I can say, hey, go over there. Okay, boom, and it happens.
Yeah. I think a lot of that too has to do with, understanding people's needs in communication. Everybody has a different style of communication. Everybody needs different help. Not everybody gets it. Some people are auditory, so you can say something that's fine. Something people are visual. Like I'd like to talk with my hands,
Me too.
A quick little anecdote. I was at a training recently, and this is kind of like we were talking about. We were talking a lot about like English language learners, and the person running the training, they tried an experiment with us. So what they said is, in Spanish, they told everybody to stand up and clap their hands once. So those of us that were there that could speak Spanish, we all stood up and clapped our hands, and while everyone's looking around like, what's going on? And then that person said, okay, everybody sit down, let's try that again. They said the exact same thing in Spanish, but this time they used hand signals. So everybody up, everybody clapped their hands once, and everybody did it, right? So it's the same message. Not everybody got it the first time. You change the approach, you change the method to help better understanding.
Yeah, there's a reason why they call it, like, communication is the universal language, but there's so many different forms of what it is, and I think sometimes we could be selfish with our communication. Well, I speak English. I'm going to deliver a message to you, and then it's your responsibility to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and if you don't understand what I'm saying, that's your problem. And you need to figure out how to understand me, because this is the language that I speak, right? But communication is, you said it yourself, when they started using hand gestures,
right?
Then more people stood up, more people understood.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people don't take that next step into broadening how they communicate.
Right.
I communicate this way, then it's your responsibility. Nope, it's also my responsibility to ensure that you understand what I'm saying. And
it is a two-way street, because sometimes it is on the person receiving the information.
Yeah.
They have to put forth a little more effort, Like I'm a big believer in active listening.
Yeah.
Where you really have to try and ingest the information, break it down if you have to as it's coming in. And you send signals and more signals back and forth, nodding your head. Yeah, I gotcha. Or asking clarifying questions. But like, instead of just letting something go by, be like, hold on a second, what did you mean by that? And also be on the lookout, because if someone's staring at you with like big open eyes and, there's like crickets going in their head, like, they're not going to get it either. So you both have to be on the lookout for that.
And that, active listening, because you hear it all the time. Active listening is it can be such a hard thing to do, because we are naturally built to defend, right? We are naturally built to, all right, I got to give you something back.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to just slow down. You have to slow down the conversation, because when someone's talking to me, it is my responsibility to be able to respond.
Yeah.
But in order for me to respond, I got to think about what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But I can't solely do that if what I'm supposed to be doing is listening to you speak.
Right.
And so I have to now reserve space to be able to receive the information that's coming my way, process that information, follow up with any questions. So what you're saying is this, and then be able to communicate a response.
Which is tough. And that's a skill that has to be practiced, especially for young people, right? Because you have young people working for you. I got young people in my classroom. A lot of young people, they're not used to questioning adults.
No.
At home, it's like their parents talk to them and they just kind of nod, and you don't talk back, right? A lot of people actually discourage that. They'll be like, hey, I'm talking, don't interrupt me.
Yep.
So it's tough. I can understand for a lot of people who don't have a lot of experience talking to people in general, or to younger people that don't have that confidence to stop a conversation and be like, hold on a second, I didn't quite get that.
Yeah.
That's something that I think a lot of people need to work at and practice, because that's important. The ability to stop someone in their sense, like, hold on a second, I didn't quite catch that. Because if not, you let it go and then you're just totally confused, and at the end there's no communication, it just breaks down.
And we're so used to having to respond right away.
Yeah.
Like, did you hear me? Hello? I asked you a question. Can you not? And so we're so, from, grade school, we're so used to, I got to have a response ready for that person, right?
Yeah.
I got to have a response ready for my teacher. I got to have a response ready for my parent. And we're not necessarily taught to process what's actually being, said to us,
Right.
to be able to, actually articulate an answer that makes
And that
sense.
could backfire a lot because you have a lot of people, when you're talking to someone, they're looking at you, but they're not listening to a word. All they're doing is thinking about what they're going to say next. So yeah, we get trained to have to respond very quickly. So a lot of times I think our brains go into autopilot.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, there's a word I know. Okay, let me think of what I'm going to say. And we're just waiting and watching till someone stops talking.
Yeah.
We all do that to a certain extent, right?
Yep.
But I do think as you get better at communicating, you start to see that in yourself, and that's a big key. Because a lot of people don't know they're doing that. A lot of people don't know that there's anything wrong with that. Again,
absolutely.
Especially young people.
Yeah. I remember I was working for the concept I'm working for now, and the only time I've ever had someone working for us who was deaf.
Interesting.
And I remember, I think I was on No. I came into this location. He was already hired. And I remember being kind of like, they gave me kind of a heads up. Hey, just letting you know that this person is deaf. So, just pay attention and, how you communicate them is going to be different than everyone else on your staff. And it was such a challenge to start because immediately I kind of just shut down and was like, well, and I started questioning all the ways it wouldn't work. Well, what about this? How are they going to do this? What about safety? What about what this? And I went down the list. And then I came in, this person's working, and I'm able to visually see that they're doing. And I never questioned their capabilities of what they were able to do. It was, how are they going to exist in the world around them in this particular space? How am I able to communicate? And so I had to really, it required a lot of patience of really trying to find, and then, move on. It's no more difficult than it would be to anyone else. Like I handicapped myself in what I was able to communicate to that person.
Yeah.
But then once I got to know him, and it was, it's really no different.
Did you know beforehand that this person was deaf, or was that something you learned on the spot?
No. I knew before I met that person.
Gotcha.
It was like kind of like the sit down orientation. Hey, just a heads up, there is one team member on your staff that is deaf, and so they're able to do everything that. And like I said, immediately I went right to the red. Right, I went right to all the ways it just wouldn't work, knowing that it's worked already because they've been working here for however long. Now you're invited in a space that already exists. You just have to learn how to effectively communicate with this person.
Right.
But once I got in, then it was easy. And they were so good at reading lips because this is their life. Of course they know how to, and
Right.
I learned that I didn't have to do much different than I had with any other team member that I had.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there were more visual aids naturally, but overall, it wasn't really any more difficult than it would be with someone who wasn't deaf.
Yeah, I had a similar experience where I didn't know beforehand. I covered for another teacher, and I came into their class, and right off the bat, this one kid he would not respond. He wouldn't do what he was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
I kept catching him. And he had his laptop out, and he kept watching like YouTube videos. And I keep stopping, like, hey, man, you can't do that. Nobody told me going in, and the teacher apologized later for not telling me, but he has special needs, and he can't communicate normally. He can't really speak to people, say one word here or there. Mm-hmm. He really communicates through images and videos. Yeah. So he emails teachers videos, and sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. Yeah. But that's how he communicates. So it took me a while to figure out, what is this kid just being stubborn? It's 3 times I'm telling you to close YouTube. It took me a while to figure out, right? And then it was like, okay, how do I communicate with this kid? Mm-hmm. And that was it. So that was tough because I was starting into it. I wasn't expecting anything. And not only am I now figuring out what to do with this class, it's not my class because I'm covering for someone else, but I have this special case over here that he needs different attention, different focus, and I have to change my methods. So that can get a little tricky. Like you went in, you already knew ahead of time. Did you do anything differently? Did you prep anything before going in?
No. I like how to communicate with a deaf. Like I don't think because I knew I had to. It wasn't an option. I knew I had to communicate with this person. And so I think what I started to do was communicate with them as if they were like everyone else, right? As if they weren't deaf.
Yeah.
And said, okay, let's see because I could have, all right, did some research and how best, but he's an individual. Yeah, he's deaf, but does that mean all people who are deaf are the same? No.
Yeah, not at all.
Right? And so I had to learn. The more I learned about him, then the better our communication occurred. Like, like I had to know him because at first I didn't. And I didn't want to go in with any assumptions. Like I said, when I started off, I went through all the ways it just couldn't work. And then once I started communicating with him, I felt like, oh, this is actually pretty easy. Like I said, a little more visual aids, but I don't have to do really anything different than I did with anyone else because he's an amazing lip reader. And so oftentimes I'm like, hey, I need you to do this. And he would know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes I had to like do, as an example, the hand gestures, right? Modeling certain things that I need him to do. But sometimes I have to do that with people who weren't. Like,
right. Well, you and I speak with our hands a lot anyway.
Already, right? Yeah, that's just kind of how we are as I'm literally sitting here doing it. But that's like communication often, in my experience, this is just my experience, works best when you break it down to the most basic terms. Like when you break it down, and I think we may have talked about this before, communicate as if you're communicating to a 5-year-old without condescending. Yeah, without sounding condescending, but trying to really like break it completely down. That's when a lot of times you alleviate all the other confusion.
Right.
Because sometimes we can talk from a level that maybe other people just don't understand, right? I know this very well, and so I can explain it to you, and in my mind, because I already understand it. Right. But to someone that doesn't understand it, okay, I have to pretend like you know nothing about this. And I think the better the person knows and understands who you are, then it doesn't necessarily sound condescending. Now, for someone who doesn't know me, it could. But I think that's like so much of communication is knowing who you are and getting more of a piece of who you are. Like even when we're doing this podcast, there's some people who may not know us, but I think the more they know us, the more effective our communication is.
Right.
Because the more they just know the nuances of kind of how we speak and
Phrase
what
things,
we mean, phrases, just things that we say. But sometimes the mistake is communication is being so external and just so selfish. What I have to say is far more important than you understanding what I have to say.
Yeah.
My job is to say it. And then once I do that, I clock out and I go. But that's not communication. That's just speaking with someone. And so I think that's often the challenge. Communication is far more intimate than sometimes we want to acknowledge.
And that's good. That idea of kind of like stepping out and reevaluating, be like, wait a minute, maybe they don't know anything I'm talking about. When I first started at the beginning of the school year, I took a lot of that for granted, Working in the industry for so long, I'm used to people knowing what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I would use words, for example, like we're talking about composition or hierarchy, or we're talking about art. Some of these kids have never heard those words before, And so I had to learn I got to slow down and just be careful of the language I use and make sure that I'm explaining that to them. Not because, because they don't know any better, but they've never heard it or learned it, So not making any assumptions on them or their comprehension levels, but just being prepared to be like, hold on a second, I have to make this kind of universal for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too to like how can I explain this? There's communication to grow, and then there's communication to maybe sustain or inform. Like there's certain language components that I can use. If I'm talking, like if you're talking in a room full of filmmakers, right, and you have a background, they have the same background, you can speak a certain language that as long as everyone in that building or in that space is in the same field, they'll understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, we have a shared vocabulary.
Right, exactly. You have a shared vocabulary. But then there's the type of language or type of vocabulary where it is an open to whether I'm in a room with people in this industry or people who don't know nothing, they're able to digest it. And so, like for me, I work with people on all sorts of different levels of the business, and so I have to ensure that my communication is palatable
palatable
for the entire room, because I'm not talking to a bunch of GMs, right? I'm talking to hosts, I'm talking to servers, I'm talking to bartenders, right? I may have been doing this for 10, 15 years, but this person just got into it. And so
or they might still like be in high school. You have some
right, or
students,
they might just, still be in high school. So I have to ensure that the language that I speak is palatable for a wide range of knowledge and comprehension.
Yeah.
So because that type of language can grow the space, as opposed to speaking to a room that everyone is in the same field. It's a shared knowledge. You're not necessarily looking to grow the room. You're thinking of growing, say, the knowledge within a room.
Yeah.
But if you're in the space of growing the room, then you got to make sure that your language speaks to everyone across the board. And that's something that I've had to learn, because while you may be the smartest person in the room, you're not speaking to the smartest person in the room as it pertains to that knowledge. You're speaking to the wide range. And so it's got to be something that you can feed everyone with.
Yeah. And it might not even just be an intelligence thing. It's just like a familiarity thing.
Exactly. With whatever that subject matter is.
Right.
Don't start off with caviar, right? Because that everyone doesn't have the palate for that.
Yeah.
Start off with some bread. Give them bread. Just feed them.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm not handing out caviar to everyone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we had a GM conference, maybe we can up the quality of what we're doing. But right now, I'm just trying to feed you bread. I want you to understand what I'm saying. I want you to understand the concept in which I'm talking about. And then we can continue to grow the room together.
See, and I think that's something that you do. Well, we both do. But we speak a lot in analogies and metaphors and similes.
A lot.
Because I think you and I are visual thinkers.
Yeah.
Right? So we're trying to, explain this concept in language, and we don't feel like the message is getting through. So we start breaking down into images. Okay.
Yeah.
You got this cup, right? And you got to fill the cup, right? And we do that a lot. I think that helps. But I've had some instances where people are like, I get it. Right?
You don't have to
Right.
go that deep. I got it. But sometimes the room, a third of the room gets it, but maybe a fourth of the room doesn't, right? And
we're talking about cups now? What is he talking
right,
about?
because sometimes you have to be aware of how you do it, because you don't want to make the third seem dumb. Like, why are you talking? I understand what you're saying.
I got you the first time. Yeah.
That's where you kind of reach into your tool bag. Like for me, I use the analogy quite often. You're going to swallow water when you're learning how to swim. Right? But
gas in the car.
Gas in
tree,
the car.
Fruit in the tree.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right. Exactly. Fruit in the tree. And because that's a common language.
Right.
No matter where you go in the world, for the most part, at least people understand what a tree is.
Right.
They may not have trees. You can be in LA and not necessarily
I haven't
see
seen
trees.
a tree. I don't know.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you understand how a tree functions. And so I'm going to use a common understanding of how this works to get you to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about training. Or when I'm talking about serving to a person who has never served. Okay, now let's take how this essentially functions and let's relate it to, do you know how to swim? Yes. Okay, how much water did you swallow when you learned how to swim? Ooh, a lot. How much water do you still, swallow?
Yeah.
Ooh, still a lot. Okay, so swallowing water, it's like making mistakes, right? It's kind of like shortcomings.
Yeah.
It's a part of the process. So now you understand, okay, so I am going to make mistakes in becoming, that's a part of the process. And as you continue to advance, you'll swallow less water. And so now they see mistakes as swallowing water. I do it with my choir all the time. And when we have maybe a rough Sunday, they go, oh, we swallowed some water.
Yeah.
Because it's, whether you know what, I just need you to understand what growth and development looks like. However I can get you there, I got to reach in the tool bag. Sometimes people only got one tool in their bag. You're just going to have a hard time communicating.
See, now we're on tool bags.
Right? Exactly. I did it without even knowing that I was actually doing it. But you got to have, communication is so broad. You got to get more than a hammer in your toolbox.
Right.
Right?
All right. So, okay. So I got a challenge. For the listeners, I got a challenge, right?
Okay.
For those of you that are having some trouble communicating, right? On both sides, you're trying to explain something and someone's not quite getting it, or someone's explaining something to you and you get it, but they won't shut up, right? So try that. Try a metaphor. Try it. I'm just curious if anybody out there tries it, drop us a line, let us know what happened.
Yeah.
But try that. If you have trouble communicating, maybe you're a shy person, maybe you're not really good at explaining things, try a metaphor. Think of a metaphor and use that. Use some other kind of analogy or whatever to explain your point.
Exactly.
See how it goes. And I'm curious to see if anybody tries it and how it goes for them.
Yeah. I really, and try to use a common analogy or metaphor. Like, don't open the hood of a car. You're only going to be talking to mechanics.
Right.
Like, I can open up the hood of my car and I know where the engine is.
Right.
And I know where I'm supposed to put the oil, and I know where I'm supposed to put the windshield wiper.
But someone else does that for you.
Right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
someone else does it.
Yeah.
Use something that most people know and understand. Even if they don't necessarily do it, they know and understand. Brushing teeth. Everyone should, for the most part, understand what it means to brush your teeth. That's a common understanding.
Common experience, yeah.
It's a common experience. Use something like that, because everyone doesn't know Chinese.
Right.
But Chinese people brush their teeth. So if you can find that common ground between the differences of people, because we're all different, but we do some of the same things.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have the experience that you have, but I understand what it feels like to be married. And you understand what it feels like to be married.
Yeah.
Right? We have that common ground in our differences. And so I think that's kind of the key in using those analogies and metaphors, is that you find the common ground. Okay, now you've established a connection. Sometimes we take a plug and we power it in, but we don't check if there's power. We plug into someone, but we don't actually turn it on to see if it works.
Yeah.
And that's that common ground, is you're trying to establish the power, the connection between you and the other person or the group of people that you're talking to. But you got to check if there's power, because if not, I can guarantee you, you're not communication. You're just talking to somebody.
I got your metaphor. Thank you. I know, we can't help it. Well, I would also say that another thing to be careful of is maybe like pacing or intensity, right? Mm. Because I've had situations like that. I had a conversation recently with someone where I learned about something new, and it's completely new. It's even new to the person that I was speaking to, but it's kind of similar to something their knowledge base. So I start to explain it to them, and it was immediately like they became the expert, and they took control of the conversation, and they were like telling me about this thing I just told them about that they had never heard before. And where I had to stop them, like, hey, like I was trying to, yeah, you got to be careful, because in an instance like that, I was trying to share something with someone that, it was something I kind of cared about, and I knew that they would care about too. But instead of like joining me in that experience and sitting with me, they kind of took it over and made it about them. So you got to be careful with that too. Like, you got to be able to listen to people, right? And just let them, like, sometimes they take some time to get through something. Just give them some time to get through a thought.
So the whole time you're talking, because we use car metaphors several times, I'm like, so they kicked you. They didn't like the way you were driving. They kicked you out the driver's seat. They got in the driver's seat, and you're in the seat.
Exactly.
Like, wait,
how did I get here?
How did I get here? Wasn't I just driving the car? Like, yeah, I didn't like how you were driving.
That's right.
So we're going where I want to go.
Yeah.
But that's like I said, the analogies and metaphors, we're going to use them all throughout, because that's who we are.
Yeah.
But it does help. It's an effective way to be able to communicate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And on that note, we're out of time.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I felt good about today's conversation.
Yeah,
it felt really fun. All right. Again, thank you so much. Like and subscribe. Check out our website, leadingtheway.show. Drop us a line, and we hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Peace.